Las Vegas, Caesar's Palace. In 1967, Evel Knievel attempted to jump the hotel's fountain. In '93, David Copperfield filmed the finale to his Fires of Passion TV special there. And in 1996, Guy Hollingworth performed a card trick at Caesar's Magical Empire. Hollingworth's performance was part of The World's Greatest Magic, which aired on NBC. He took a card, tore it into 4 pieces, and then put it back together, 1 piece at a time. I was 14 years old when that aired, and that performance was one of the things that led me to become fascinated by close-up magic. And now, I'm excited to share with you a routine that was inspired by Hollingworth's performance. Welcome. Tell the camera what happened.
The cards together.
Magic, duh.
Do you know any kind of origami?
Oh, I know how to make a hat from a napkin. That's about it.
You said you're Asian.
I'm Asian. It's a long time ago.
But you learn.
When I was younger, I learned how to make a paper hat. And some really good
That's about it. That's about it.
right?
Like a little swan.
Do you know the difference between origami and kirigami?
No.
I'm not.
Kirigami is like origami, it's related.
Okay.
But instead of just folding, you tear the card.
Oh, I didn't know this. Lies. I do know what this is.
What is it?
You take paper and you make a form out of the paper that you've torn into the shape that you would like it to.
Exactly. So it involves not just folding, but actually tearing.
Correct.
So, what does this look like to you? 4 pieces.
4 pieces.
4 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 pieces, right?
Yes.
I'm gonna try to make something.
Okay.
If I just touch the pieces.
Wait, what the hell? Wait, what the hell? We'll put them back together.
You just put that.
Does that feel back together?
Yes.
Does it feel like there's any tape or any glue on there?
No.
I didn't feel tape and I didn't feel glue. My hands
That's
aren't
1
sticky.
piece. We'll do it again. Come over here. Both of you over here on this side. Yeah, right over here.
Shit, it is back together.
I'm not kidding, guys.
They don't teach you that. Your science, Heidi.
See the torn edges here?
Okay.
If I just touch them. That's great, isn't it?
I don't understand how that works.
We have 1 piece left. The last piece. And the last piece is the hardest because there are 2 edges instead of just 1.
Okay.
For the last piece, I need some heat. Do you have a lighter? Anybody smoke?
I don't know. I don't. Waffles up.
I've got one.
Oh.
Watch. Gather around. Give me a little cover here. Like this.
We'll find out.
Oh, I see.
See fire? Shield it. There you go.
That's so there's nothing on your fingers.
If I just heat the edges of the card, squeeze.
Come on.
What? No. What?
See how it starts to turn black?
Yeah.
Look.
But it's together.
Okay.
Take a look.
What happened there?
Did it melt back together?
Awesome. Look at that.
Oh my god.
The other pieces clearly didn't burn back together.
Hey, it's together.
I know. That's a bit crazy. There's a card there. Pretty cool.
Great job. David Regal was the first to publish a piece-by-piece torn and restored card. And since then, magicians have obsessed over the idea, myself included. Now, as I mentioned, I saw Guy Hollingworth perform his version on The World's Greatest Magic. A few years later, when he published his book, Drawing Room Deceptions, I bought it and learned the routine. In fact, I began to look up everything I could on the torn and restored card, and eventually I came across a routine by Paul Harris called The Ultimate Ripoff. It's not piece by piece, but what was really interesting about it was that Paul used sleight of hand to create the illusion that he tore the card. He didn't really tear it. That routine became my starting point for this one. I began to play with it, and over the years it changed and evolved into something new. As I teach this, it will look difficult, but I do want you to think of this as if it were origami or kirigami. In other words, I'm going to show you a very specific series of folds and tears. Each one is necessary, and once you remember where to fold and where to tear, the handling isn't that difficult. So let's get started. Now there's a little bit of preparation that we have to do before we start. You're going to need a lighter and 2 cards. You need a card that you intend to tear up and a duplicate. Surprise! We're going to prepare this duplicate so that it looks like one corner has been fused into place. Here's how we do that. Let me put this one aside. I'll grab one that's not set up. So we have 2 Jack of Diamonds. We're going to start by folding it into quarters, like this. And you want to be careful not to crease it too much. Depending upon the humidity and the kind of cards that you're using, those creases could actually break apart during the performance, and that's not good. So we'll just lightly crease it. Next, we're going to tear here, here, and here, because it's this piece, the upper right corner, that we want to prepare. So we'll rip a little bit here, just about ½ an inch, not much. We'll do the same here. And to get the middle, we'll fold it and rip down just a bit here and a little bit here. Okay, so it's torn here, here, and here. Next, grab your lighter, and we're going to burn these edges. Because we've torn it, those torn edges will burn away, which rounds the corners, and it looks nice. So we'll burn it here. We'll come down the crease. We'll burn it a little bit in the middle. In fact, we'll even burn a little bit right here. Be careful not to burn too much. Just like that. And next, we'll come here. We'll burn down. And we'll get that middle again. So if you look, this piece now looks like it's been fused into place. That's pretty cool. Make sure that it's cool. And fold it so the burns are on the inside. And place this card in your left pocket. Take your lighter, put your lighter in your right pocket. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a jacket or pants or a dress, whatever you're comfortable in. And you also want to make sure that your other duplicate card is in the deck. And that's the setup. Okay, when you're ready to perform, force the duplicate and put the rest of the deck away. Now, like before, we're going to start by folding this into quarters. And again, we don't want to crease it too much. So we'll fold there and here. Now the first piece we're going to tear off is this upper right corner. In fact, this is the only piece that we actually tear off the card. So I'll rip down and down. And that's the first piece. We're now going to create the illusion that we tear this second piece off. But don't do anything just yet. Don't move, because I want to show you what this looks like. It looks and sounds exactly like I tear that piece off, but that piece is still attached. Because what you saw and heard tearing was that first piece that we ripped off a minute ago. Here's how that happens. You've just torn off this first piece, so you should be in this position. Rotate this piece clockwise and hold it like this. And you want to angle your right shoulder towards your audience just a little bit. And this card, you want to tilt it back towards yourself just a bit. Your right hand moves in front, and your right thumb secretly folds that second piece behind the card. Your left thumb locks the first piece into position, and you begin to tear down. Now from the front, because of the position of your fingers, everything looks like it should. You want to be careful though that you don't accidentally spread your fingers a little bit and flash the true situation. Now we don't want to rip all the way through this piece. So when you get down to about this position, stop tearing and you're going to snap it back towards yourself. But as you do, allow your third finger to snap against this bottom corner. And that adds a final sound to the action. Like that. So that's the second piece. We're now going to do something similar with the final piece. But again, don't move just yet. Stay right where you are. Let me show you what this looks like. Now that looks convincing because I really am ripping the card, but I don't tear all the way through. And that's the key. Now you should be in this position. We've just apparently torn off this second piece. Rotate the card in your left hand clockwise and rotate the piece in your right hand counterclockwise like this and put this piece here. You're going to start the tear by pushing your middle finger, your right middle finger, towards yourself, which puts a little tear in the very bottom. You don't want much, just a half an inch. Next, reposition, and you're going to rip down from the top. Now you don't want to tear all the way through, so you want to stop tearing right about here when there's just about a half inch left. At this point, your hand is going to fold over both pieces, but your right fingers push that piece closed, and again you're going to snap this single piece forward as if you've torn it off, and you want to brush your right fingernails against the card as you do that. Now I know that looks a little messy slow, but when you put all that together, it looks and sounds like you tear this piece off. So you've just apparently ripped the card into 4 separate pieces. In performance, that whole sequence just takes a couple of seconds. I'm now going to show you how to get into a very nice display, check this out, where you can apparently show 4 separate pieces. 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's very fair and very simple. That's what it looks like. Here's what you do. Let me go back. You should be in this position here. You've just apparently ripped this piece off. Relax your left thumb. That will allow these pieces to open up a little bit. Insert your left index finger here and hold. Your right hand now briefly moves in front, and when it does, your left middle finger pushes these pieces over, and your right thumb continues to fold those pieces around. This piece ends up at the face of the packet. Now pull back with your left thumb on this uppermost piece, like this, and as you do, you will notice that it begins to bow out down here. As that happens, crease it. You're now going to hold these pieces with your left thumb laying right along the bottom edge here, all the way up to where this piece connects, right there. And you have a very nice display. Now because you have 4 separate edges, you can thumb through 1, 2, 3, and 4 and convincingly show what appears to be 4 separate pieces. Now this is a really nice moment in the routine because up until this point your audience has been watching from the front. They've seen the backs of your hands and this side of the pieces. But when you lower your hand, they get to see this side of the pieces and they see your palms. So not only is it fair and convincing, but it also really sells the idea that you're not hiding anything. Now to your audience, the effect hasn't even started yet, and you're already halfway done. Now you need to be careful here throughout this that you don't focus a weird amount of attention on the card when you're ripping it up. Do it naturally. Just tear it up. Before we move on, let's take a look at what that looks like during performance. Do you know any kind of origami?
Oh, I know how to make a hat from a napkin. That's about it.
Okay, so I think the thing that I really want you to see about this sequence is that I just do it. I want the audience to take for granted that the card is being ripped into 4 pieces. So I don't stare at it while I'm doing it. I don't call any unnatural attention to it. They can see and they can hear that the card's being torn.
Oh, lies. I do know what this is.
What is it?
You take paper and you make a form out of the paper that you've torn to the shape that you would like it to.
Exactly. So it involves not just folding but actually tearing.
Correct.
And here's the display. They see 4 pieces. So to the audience, the effect is just now beginning. So we've just created the illusion that we've torn the card into 4 separate pieces. Now for the fun part. Let's put it back together. Here's what the first piece looks like. If I just touch them, they stick. In fact, I'll even let my volunteer feel right here, and they can feel that that's back together. So that's what it looks like. Here's what happens. This is the position that you should be in. You've just finished displaying these pieces to the audience. As you bring your hands back up, grab here with your right hand so that you can move your thumb here. Remove this piece and rotate it clockwise like this. Now that's all done in one action as you bring your hands back up. Now from the front, the audience can't tell that this piece here has been secretly folded behind. But if you look closely, you'll see that we have a bit of a problem. I'm about to stick this piece here, but the border's in the wrong place. And if we simply rotate the piece, now this border's in the wrong place. So we hide that discrepancy by placing one finger here and one finger here. Let me do that all again. This is our starting position. In one action, this moves down, remove, rotate, and cover. Now when you're ready to restore it, call attention to this piece, bring your hands together, and as you do, close your fingers, press down with your left thumb, your right thumb moves down, out of the way, and then you slide that extra piece downward like this. Now you're not palming this hidden piece. You don't have to let go and get fancy. Don't do that. You leave it right here, because right after you tug on it, take the card, lay it on top of the hidden piece as you lower your hand and invite someone to feel right here, and they'll feel that it's back together. And everything looks exactly like it should look. Now if you're working for a larger crowd, you can do this. Instead of laying the card on the hidden piece and then lowering your hand, you can move that hidden piece up and then flip everything over right here. And that keeps everything at chest height, which can be nice. So that's the first piece. This next piece sells the entire routine. This looks like real magic. And the best thing is it looks just as good for anyone who's watching over your shoulder from behind as it does for anyone who's watching from the front. So there are no angle issues. Take the piece that's separate. This goes in your mouth or in your breast pocket if you have one. And you want to try to hide that torn edge. Now if you remember from before, we didn't rip this piece all the way off. We tore it, but not all the way through. Even though it's still attached right here in the middle, we can angle it downward like this, and then if you clip it between your left index and middle fingers, we have a very nice display. Now it looks like you're just showing that you have nothing hidden in your hands, and this piece really does look separate. Now because there are no angle issues, and this looks just as good for anyone peeking over your shoulder, at this point, I like to step into my crowd, so that I have people watching from all sides. Now because this piece is still attached in the middle, all we have to do to put it back together is line up the edges. Ta-da! Of course, if we take our time with that, it looks very pretty. It looks like we just take the piece, slowly bring the edges together, and somehow it sticks. It's a very nice moment. But there is a bit of a knack to that. As you bring the pieces together, you want to position this edge here so that it's directly on top of the other edge, not to the side like this, right on top. You want to do the same thing with this back corner. All right, so use the fourth finger of your right hand to push that corner up so it's directly on top. And what that does is it puts a little twist in the piece, which puts a little tension on it, and it helps it to stay together. Now once again, from here you can clip it between your fingers and display. You can even apparently tug on the pieces like this. In reality, this is very gentle. I'm just rotating between my hands, but it gives that same impression that I'm tugging on the pieces to show that it's back together. And that's the second piece. Now there is a chance that this piece could break off accidentally during performance. If that happens, don't panic. That could happen if you tear it too much or even if you crease it too much. But you can skip this moment and move right to the finale. Now obviously that's not ideal, it kind of sucks. This is a really nice moment, but at least the trick isn't ruined. With practice and experience though, you won't have that problem. The last thing I want to mention about this moment is that the more you practice this with the same card, the weaker that section in the middle will become, which means that after a couple of times, it's just going to stop working. So it's best to do this with a fresh card. We have one piece left, the last piece. Now this last piece is a little different, so before we talk about it, let's go back and take a quick look at everything that we just covered during a live performance. Here's the first piece. If I just touch the pieces.
Wait, what the hell? Wait, what the hell? Those are not together.
Now notice that she doesn't really react until she sees the other side of the card. This is such a nice moment, being able to let your audience feel that the card is back together.
Glue or any tape?
I didn't feel tape and I didn't feel glue. My hands
That's
are
one
sticky.
piece. We'll do it again. Come over here.
Okay.
Both of you over here on this side. When you perform, keep in mind that you're in control, so you can move people around if you want.
I'm not kidding, guys.
They don't teach you that. It's not real. It's your science, Heidi.
See the torn edges here?
Okay.
If I just touch them, this is such a fun moment.
That's great, isn't
And there it is.
I don't understand that.
We have one piece left. Now I wish there was some way that we could take this last piece, put it into position, and then hand the card out for inspection. I spent more time than I care to admit trying to find some way to make that happen. Unfortunately, at least within the context of this routine, that's not really possible. So instead we're going to switch this card for the card we prepared earlier. And we're going to do that by using Juan Tamariza's Crossing the Gaze. Now crossing the gaze is a bold but a very effective switch. This switch works because the direction your eyes move is more important to your audience than the direction your hands move. The first thing I'm going to do is put that piece right back into its place and then fold this into a packet and hold it in my right hand. Now remember, in my left pocket I have that card that we prepared earlier, and in my right pocket I have a lighter. So I say, for this last piece, we need some heat, and I begin to look for a lighter. I reach into my pocket and I seem distracted that I don't find my lighter. That's the action. In reality, I've just grabbed that restored card. Now in a minute, I'm going to switch this card for this one. And the switch itself is very simple. It's almost like a shuttle pass with coins. I'm going to pretend to put it in my left hand. In reality, I just keep it in my right hand and I show this card. But it's the direction that this is traveling in that's important. The switch is traveling from my right over to my left. From my right to my left. That's important because in a minute when I do the switch, I'm going to take my eyes in the opposite direction. And that's what makes this work. And I think the best way to demonstrate this is if I give you my internal dialogue, what I'm apparently thinking that makes this whole thing make sense. So I say, for this last piece, we need some heat. Does anyone have a lighter? And I begin to look for a lighter. And it's as if I think, oh, I thought I had a lighter in my pocket. It must be over here. At the moment that I do the switch, it's as if I realize that the lighter must be in my other pocket. My head and my eyes cross the action of the switch, going from my left down to my right as I look at my pocket. So moving the card from hand to hand becomes unimportant. I'm simply moving it out of the way as I reach into my pocket. And of course, when I do reach into my pocket, I leave the torn card and I pull out the lighter. And many times when you do this, someone in the audience will have a lighter and they'll pull theirs out. If I see that that happens, I put mine right back and I say, great, we'll use yours. And that is crossing the gaze. Now, I know this is a terrifying switch. I used to have a different way of switching the card. It wasn't as good, but it was much easier. And when I first read Crossing the Gaze, I thought, there's no way that I'm going to get away with this, especially at a bar where I was performing at the time. But I practiced, and I finally decided to try it. There were 4 people sitting at the bar. I did the routine, and I got to this point where I reached into my pocket and I said, does anyone have a lighter? And all 4 people turned their backs on me. One guy turned around, he started asking the bartender for a lighter. The girls were going through their purses. I actually paused mid-switch, like I was waiting for them to turn back around so I could finish my fancy switch. Throughout this routine, you build a certain amount of trust with the audience. They can see that you're only using one card. They're looking at both sides. They can see you're not hiding anything. They can also see that the same card you tear is the same one you're putting back together. So you build trust. And when you get to the end of the routine and you say, to finish, I need a lighter, they genuinely want to help find you a lighter. This all comes down to attitude. If you have the right attitude when you do this, you will be surprised at how easy this is to get away with, because the attention just goes elsewhere. So that's Juan Tamariz's Crossing the Gaze, which you can find in his book, The 5 Points in Magic. And that's it. Once you switch the card and you have a lighter, you're pretty much done. Because you prepared this earlier, you don't actually have to burn it much now. Just run it through the flames and then open it to show that that last piece has been fused into position. Let's take a look at that in another performance. We have one piece left. Okay, the last piece. Now in a moment, I'm going to ask if anyone has a lighter. Watch what happens when I do. I need some heat. Do you have a lighter? Anybody smoke? They all look away. The attention just breaks. And by the time they look back, the switch is done. This is such a non-moment. None of them will ever remember that I asked for a lighter. But they will swear that that card was out in front of them throughout the entire routine. With the right attitude, it's surprisingly easy to get away with this switch. And there it is. We've covered the majority of the routine, but there are a couple of last things that I want to mention. Now, I'm aware that in light of recent events, this is terribly ironic, but I've been doing this as part of the routine for years, and I think it's interesting and worth mentioning. This looks horrific. It looks like I'm burning my finger. There's no gimmicks. There's no setup. It's a normal lighter. This is essentially science. The coolest part of the flame is at the bottom. It's the blue. That's where the gas is just coming out. So when I do this, I'll rest my finger right here. And if you look closely, what you'll see is that that gas curves around my finger. And if you look at everything that's touching my finger, you'll see that it's blue. As long as I keep it moving, it doesn't get hot enough to burn. I can feel it warm up, but it doesn't burn. If I stop moving, it hurts like hell. Don't stop moving. Now you can do this with a normal lighter or with a Zippo lighter. Don't do this with one of those butane cigar lighters. Bad idea. Now this is shocking, but I also think it plays an interesting role within the structure of the routine. Doing something with the lighter provides a bit of time delay, or a time misdirection, between when you switch the card and when you go back to it, and that can help. But it's really not necessary. So if you're not interested in doing this with the lighter, then skip it. Another thing I want to talk about is the idea of having the card signed. Now with many versions of this effect, the handling is quite closed. The audience never really feels like they're seeing everything, and on some level they may even suspect that another card is in play. In those cases, of course, a signature can help. But this routine is different. With this routine, the audience never doubts that there's only one card. They see both sides. They see that your hands are empty. They even touch the card as it's being restored. So the openness of the handling makes a signature unnecessary. Don't worry about that. There's one last thing that I want to mention. When I was younger, I did a lot of bar magic, and the bar that I performed in was really more of a nightclub. They had a dance floor, a DJ, dim lighting, and it was very loud. So as you can imagine, that made doing magic difficult. I spent some time trying to find a good way to hand out my business card when I was done. And eventually, I realized that this routine would be perfect if you did it with a business card. So I started doing that, and it killed. In many ways, I think this is better with a business card. I had the wonderful experience a few years after I was done performing at the bar. I ran into one of the regulars, and he still had my business card in his wallet that was folded and burnt. He pulled it out and he said, "Do you remember when you ripped this up and stuck it back together?" He'd kept it for years. So this routine works great with playing cards, but it also works really well with a business card, and I think that's worth playing with. Whenever I think of Caesar's Palace, I think of Caesar's Magical Empire. Unfortunately, they closed it down back in 2002 to make room for Celine Dion's show. But I'll never forget being a kid and watching the world's greatest magic and seeing Guy Hollingworth perform. That memory, like Celine Dion's heart, will go on. And on. And on. This version of the Torn or Restored card is strong and practical, and the ending makes it special because it's not perfect. At the end, the card is folded. It's torn. It's burnt. There are even holes, but in between the holes, it's back together. In a way, it becomes a sort of impossible object, and you leave your audience with evidence of the magic that you did. That's pretty cool. I'm Wayne Houchin. I hope you enjoy it. It's been a pleasure.